I am thrilled to partner with Ancient and Brave. I am all about creating space for well-being in my day-to-day. And with Ancient and Brave, you can find your own ritual with their sustainably sourced collagen, blends and supplements, whatever your well-being goals. You can add a scoop of collagen or a dash of MCT oil to your morning coffee for the ultimate habit stack. What's more, Ancient and Brave are proud members of 1% for the Planet, meaning 1% of all their sales goes directly to environmental causes. So by adding true collagen to your wellness routine, you can take care of yourself and the planet too. For more details, visit ancientandbrave.earth/planet and discover how your choices can make a difference. Hello, I'm Caroline Marshall and welcome to Bump to Business Owner, the podcast speaking to mums in business, you. I'll be in conversation with some of the most inspiring women and mothers in enterprise about their journey, how they created their successful businesses alongside raising their children, and what that looks like in work and family life. Hello and welcome back to Bump to Business Owner. I'm your host, Caroline Marshall, and today we're back with another solo episode. I can't lie, it still feels a bit odd to be just sat here talking on my own, and I feel like it's one of those things. I'm hoping that if I'm consistent with these mini-sodes, eventually it'll start to become normal, and that I'm not like 6 years old again recording my own radio show on my cassette player, if you're a fellow millennial that did that. I actually listened to Alice Benham before this to feel inspired. I'm like, wow, she sounds so natural. Like, this is really normal talking to yourself. So I hope I sound like that because I don't feel like that right now. But anyways, if I'm consistent enough, which is the theme of this episode, maybe it will happen. And actually, I was going to talk about consistency because I actually feel it's so easy when you've done something really amazing or you're in a really successful place with your business and it's like, this is how I got here. And I guess maybe I am at a successful place in my business, but it's just feeling quite January still. And budgets are hard for a lot of clients, a lot of potential clients. And I've been speaking to people outside of my client scope and like lawyers, just friends, who've been saying odd things have been happening. So I think it's a really good way to push you through if you're feeling in a similar way, to help you stay consistent, is that we're all in this together, and here's some consistent tips to try. Because I really believe, like, alongside optimism is being consistent with some things, not giving yourself a hard time if you're not, and you're not having a good day, a good week, because we're normal. But while I'm head down hustle mode, and now what is keeping me going during this time? I'm also in a weird spot. I start this business growth program in February as I'm recording this, and I have actually read from others who started it last year that they felt in a weird spot because I think you're about to do all this work on your business and you kind of feel like a little bit of like, there's only so much I can do right now because I know it's probably all going to be thrown out the window come this growth program, but we'll see what happens. And I've just been doing a post on productivity, and is it always bad if you're not super productive or if you're procrastinating on things? Because actually maybe you're procrastinating for a reason. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that. So what does consistency mean to me? I think consistency is when you keep going when things aren't going to plan or not what you thought, and also but choosing what is manageable over what you think you should be doing. I think such a case and example of this is LinkedIn. So many business owners want to gain traction on there, and I see this all the time. And so people are like, we should be posting. I think the LinkedIn gods tell us we should be posting 5 days a week. It's like, my friend Jassy says this, shout out to Jassy if you're listening. It's always like, we're business owners. It's not our full-time job to be creating content 5 days a week. And is that consistent for you as you scale, as you grow, even if you get help in it? So I do it 3 days a week, and people always say they see my LinkedIn content. And I'm not doing it 5 days a week. 3 days a week is still a lot, still a commitment. So that might not be right for you. And I've had to build up to that. But just so you know, this is why I bring up, I think that's such a good example of people say they see my LinkedIn content and I'm not doing it 5 days a week, but I am consistent on 3 days per week, or try to be. Not necessarily consistent on days, so probably could be better with that. But here are things that help me be consistent, and I think I will shout about this until the cows come home. It's all about a process. So if there's something I have to do regularly, have the process that it's scheduled in my calendar regularly. So for things like on a Thursday, we're in the routine that I provide content video for my content person, Rachel, shout out, to schedule on Instagram. And so now I've had to have that scheduled in my calendar on a Thursday. And trust me, I'm not always consistent with the timing or when, but I know it's around then. Along with a Monday, I look at my LinkedIn content for the week, and it's scheduled there, and it's also in my ClickUp where I have things scheduled. And that is really how I stay consistent with stuff. Or even with things like when I was trying to build a habit of reading every day, which has got so much easier since my kids have got older. I actually scheduled, try to read 5 pages a day just to keep that consistency there. And that's quite unique. That's not for everyone, but that's still in my ClickUp to read every day. And it's just kind of that prompt and a reminder. And I think having a process for things really helps, along with, I think what also is it comes back to content again, but staying consistent with a podcast. I've made it quite clear from day dot that I wouldn't have been consistent without the team there. But also we have a process, and we have a process, and we've stayed consistent with that process. We've changed things up, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we have a process, we have a format, and that is how we've stayed consistent with the podcast, and that is how results start to show. So utter geek there, and I'm afraid that's not sexy, but having processes, and processes always sounds really scary, like, oh, where do I start? But it could be like a 2-step process, or just having something in your to-do list that regularly pops up and you tick it off, and then it comes back for the next day or the next week. So I always like to say, have a process for things and what works for you. But next on that, which I'll come back to with the podcast process, is also consistently do a lessons learned and feedback with yourself, and what is and what isn't working. I would love to do my LinkedIn content on a Friday, and that's going to take a bit of a shift. And so I'm constantly reviewing what's working, what isn't. And we do the same with our podcast process. As part of we have a monthly team meeting for the podcast. I'm like, what are our lessons learned? Do you have any feedback for me? And we have had to tweak stuff, and I'd be like, well, I want the guests to get this more in advance, so how do we do this, and how do we get there? Can we do this by then? This is the process. So we all start to learn the process, so we're a bit quicker. That happens. But we're also doing lessons learned and feedback. And we had our meeting recently, and I was like, was there anything? And we're like, actually, we're all in quite a good rhythm. I'm about to start on this business growth program. Is there anything we changed a lot in September following feedback from a podcast agency? Is there anything we really need to change right now, or would we be changing it for the sake of changing it? And we decided not to change anything because we'd be doing it for the sake of it. And it's through constantly having that feedback, though, we proactively chose not to change anything and just stay consistent with what we're doing for now. And maybe come June we'll readdress it, and that will be something then to bring in September if there is anything we want to change or adapt with this podcast. So, and when I say feedback as well, that comes back to asking for feedback if you're working with other people, if you have a mentor or a coach, feedback on what you're doing consistently well and what you're not doing consistently well. I do think, though, on a caveat to that, is you got to be flexible and kind to yourself. So I am probably getting a bit boring talking about how much I'm obsessed with well-being. But if this was a tech bro podcast where they don't have kids and they're hustling, they'd be talking about well-being and getting up at the same time every day, doing XYZ at the same time every day. I am a mother. I don't have time to do the same stuff every day, and even I just don't. I don't think I probably work well like that, but we'll find out when the kids leave home. I'm too stuck in this parenthood mode to know what that life is like without kids. But I like to meditate every day. I like to have a cold shower every day. I like to do some form of journaling, manifestation, gratitude. It's not at the same time every day. And while that would be ideal to have that rhythm, it just doesn't work like that. I just meditated before this podcast, so it is ideal that I do my meditation before I have any meetings, before I have any calls, but it really just doesn't work like that. Or yesterday, I did get really stressed in my business. I had my workout class. I was meant to come back and work, and I was like, no, I need to go meditate. So it's kind of having that awareness to change up your flexible and staying consistent with it, and not beating yourself up if you don't do something one day and the next day maybe you double down on doing extra work on whatever that is. So I really think that is a key for being consistent. And I really think, if you, having been in business for 5 years, well, it's not actually that long in the grand scheme, I do think it's from continuing to find ways to change the business, work on the business, stay consistent when things aren't always going to plan, and how we can change things. And, you know, things like sales, I've had a consistent process on that. That isn't perfect, isn't, you know, going to scale us maybe to the next stage of doubling the business, but it's really worked. And I can go back to it like I did yesterday and be like, right, who should I keep in contact today? Who should I chat to? Or even yesterday, I put on my stories that I finally got my inbox down to 0 again. I am consistent in wanting to get my inbox down to 0. I am consistent in trying new ways to get the inbox down to 0. Am I consistent with a 0 inbox? No. I'm probably more consistent than others though. So it's probably the EA and me giving myself a hard time. And I am going to have someone doing my inbox again soon, because I do think that's life-changing. Always plugging the VA support for how it can change your life, including for me. But literally, someone who was a fantastic business owner who I really respect, has been on this podcast, was like, how have you done that? And it is through, I'm obsessed with getting my inbox down to 0, and that isn't for everyone, but it means that I am consistent with keeping it down. And I've talked about on this podcast how I try not to look at it during the day. It does mean last night I did stay up late to work to get it down there, because I just knew I'd feel better. And I think that is ultimately the point of being consistent, is if it makes you feel better, then keep going even during those times. So I have got down to 0 inbox again. Is it back up to 20-30 emails? Absolutely. But I will get it back down to 0 tonight, I promise you. Fingers crossed. And also don't look at my to-do list, which I've just been moving things on to a later date. But it makes you feel so much better being consistent with it. And so join me on this journey. Bear with me on the fact that I think this is such a good example that I'm still feeling a little bit awkward about what I'm chatting to you about. On a solo episode, I'm like, does anyone even really want to hear this about what's getting my business from here to here? We are 1.5 years into the podcast? Yes, almost 1.5 years into the podcast. And these solo episodes still feel really icky for me. A bit, like I said, like I'm a 6-year-old recording on a tape player, which makes me feel really old. But I am being consistent. I'm going with the process, because it can always lead to somewhere. And I think me finding things to talk about, sharing with you the things that I'm finding challenging, I know I'm not alone in this. And if there's someone out there starting a podcast and they just feel a bit icky recording like this, then come listen to this episode and just keep being consistent with it and keep going and ask for feedback and give yourself a bit of kindness. Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you so much to Ancient and Brave for sponsoring today's episode of the Bump to Business Owner podcast. Try their Find Your Ritual quiz online to find out which of their products will help you achieve your wellness goals. Subscribe, and not only will you get your order regularly delivered to your door, you'll also receive a ritual scoop. As a member of 1% for the Planet, 1% of Ancient and Brave sales go towards helping environmental partners working towards a better future for our planet. For more details, go to ancientandbrave.earth. Thank you so much for listening to Bump to Business Owner. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please do rate, review, follow, or subscribe wherever you're listening. It really helps us to connect with more mums and business owners. You can DM me on @BumpToBusinessOwner on Instagram, and I'll be back next week.